Good morning, year three. I hope you're well and have had a nice Zoom conversation. It might be afternoon, actually. Might be. I hope you've had a nice Zoom conversation with Miss Ashford today. I'm here for your history session now. So what we're going to be thinking about today is about the River Nile. Now we're going to understand from today's session how the River Nile was important to the ancient Egyptian civilization. Within this, we're going to try and be successful by locating it, so finding out where the River Nile is and where Egypt is in amongst the world. We're going to see how the weather varies and what's happening with the River Nile varies at different points in the year. And finally, we're going to consider and think about, it's a synonym, consider who would benefit from this weather. So the features of the River Nile at the different points in the year, we're going to try and consider and think about how they would benefit us at different points in the year. Okay, guys, last week you had a look at different roles within that civilization, within the society, if you remember, of ancient Egypt. Some of these jobs, then, can you think about which one's which? Now, I'm looking for a pharaoh, so, I've just told you that one. Right, if I'm the ruler of Egypt, I own all the land and have the power to make any laws I want. I'd like you to shout out Barthos or Oliver. Can you shout out what that job would be? Well done, Bartos and Oliver. It was pharaoh. Now, Darcy and Reuben, ready? You're going to find out who this is. So, if they were captured during the battle against Egypt and they're forced to work for the pharaoh and other rich people, who's that going to be? Which role was that in the ancient Egyptian society? Darcy and Reuben, three, two, one. Slave. Well done. You got that one perfectly. Lovely job. Okay, now, the only people who can read and write in Egypt keep records of important things. This is really useful for historians because they might be able to find out on these hieroglyphic scrolls what had happened. Who are these people? Susanna, Anch. It is the scribes. Well done, Susanna and Anch. Then we've got Rebecca. You're going to look now for me at the people who are in charge of the local provinces, so the little areas of Egypt. You can make local laws. Your position is passed down, so you get it from your dad or your mum, and it's passed down to you. It's a hereditary position, so it goes down. Okay, so what do you think, Rebecca? Who is this? It's the noble, yeah, and we use that word in England still. We have people in the House of Lords who are called nobles. Okay, and some of them historically have got their title, their peerage from their mum or dad, normally from their dad because of the nature of that. Okay, Victor and Imogen, now I want you to see if you can tell me who are these people who make sure that the gods and goddesses are kept happy. They're performing rituals and also helping with funerals. So Victor and Imogen, what do you reckon? Well done. It's the priests. Love job. Okie dokie. Now, can we have Tyrese and Leah thinking about who the pharaoh is using to help run the country? This person's also a high court judge. Who's this person? Lovely job. It's the vizier. Then we've got Isaac and Tavon. Can you have a go then telling me about which continent Egypt is? So we're thinking about this as well. So we can see we've already got North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and Oceania. And this is the location of Egypt. So we see it's towards the top right-hand corner, so the northeast of this particular continent. So which continent is this? Can you remember, Tyreek? Sorry, Tavon. Sorry, Mr. Spring's got names all over his head and they're all gushing out. Tavon, which continent is it? Well done, Tavon. Isaac, are you sure as well? Lovely job. It's Africa. Well done, Tavon and Isaac. Okay, now Schmeet and Dominic, I want you to help me now. We're going to spot why the River Nile was so important. So we can see the blue line on our map on the left-hand side of the screen. That's the River Nile, which cuts through the country of Egypt. Now, it's really important for lots of reasons. And if you look at lots of cities in the world, not just in Egypt, you see lots of cities historically have been placed on rivers because of all the things that rivers do to help people and allow people to live. If they've got water, they can drink. If they've got water, they can wash. If they've got water, they can cook. If they've got a flow of water, they can move things. So things can travel on the water. Okay. If they've got water, they can fish and therefore they can. So there's lots that water, that river is important for to allow people to have civilizations, have societies. Okay, now, River Nile, most people in the River Nile, if you look at the red dots, you can see that most people on that River Nile the red dots are big places where people live, the big cities. Okay, so we've got at the bottom, at the south, Aswan, and then we've got the Valley of the Kings, and Luxor, Zaina, Zohag, Asut, Minya, Giza, Cairo, Benha, Port Said, and Alexandria. Okay, and if you see, there's only, I think, 5 or 6 red dots within the green map that are not right next to the River Nile. And all the big places where lots of people lived are those red dots. So most people live along there. Yeah, that's because it's green, because of the water, as well as being able to drink and wash and eat because they can fish. They can also eat because they can grow things. Because otherwise, if you remember, Egypt's a desert country primarily. So lots of the places within Egypt, you couldn't grow things because you didn't have enough water. Okay. Um, in ancient Egypt, even more so than now, people needed to live near the river because they weren't able to transport water and food around the country as easily as we can now with cars and planes and things like that. Now, something that happened each year was floods. Okay, every year it left what's called silt, which is kind of this mushy stuff that was left. So after it went over the ground, it left this silt, and that did something called fertilizing the soil. Sorry, and we'll look at what the word fertilizing means in a few minutes. Fertilizing. Now, fertilizing then is when, if you see in the picture that's just come up, the kind of mushy land that's left has lots of stuff in it, lots of nutrients in it that it needs for plants to grow. So it's been fertilized, ready to grow. And it was essentially, it had to happen if people were going to be able to grow food. Okay? Now, as I said, people needed to live near the River Nile, so that they could be near the water. But even a little bit away from the river, people tried to get access to the water by using a system called irrigation, and that was a way of transporting, so moving water along little mini rivers or little holes that people had dug, so that they could farm. So if you see here, you can see the picture of the people in this picture has a kind of trough, almost like a long strip where the water was spread. So sometimes it was canals, sometimes it was other things. Now, canals are similar to rivers because they have water flowing along them, but canals are different to rivers because they don't happen by accident, they don't happen by nature. Somebody's dug a canal. And so people have made a decision in this civilization of ancient Egypt to dig holes which allow water to flow, to irrigate, to go to these places which needed water. Right, guys, said about fertilize, didn't we? Now, fertilize, it means adding some substances to soil to make plants grow. So you add something in, okay? Fertile is a word which comes from fertilize. So fertile, which means bearing or producing abundantly. It sounds very fancy, doesn't it? Basically, it means growing a lot. Okay, growing a lot. If something's fertile, it will grow. It will grow. Okay, and what we can see here is 2 bits of grass in that picture here. I know I'm blocking the bit that says image, but this is this image. You can see the greener bit has had fertilizer added to it, and the browner bit that's towards the top right hand corner of the picture has had nothing added to it. So the fertilized turf grows better. The grass is stronger, healthier, whereas the other grass, the kind of like the browner bit, is not as strong, not as well accustomed to growing. A synonym, so a word which means similar thing to fertilize, is pollinated. If you think about bees, they move things around which allow flowers to grow. They pollinate plants. Sorry, the colour's not great here. Is it killed? I was trying to think of an opposite word, a word which means the opposite to fertilizing. So if we don't water plants, sorry, if we don't give plants the food they need, we will kill them. Okay, we will kill them. The farmer used lots of manure to ensure the field was well fertilized. I know my son would like this idea that we just fertilize with fancy things. We actually sometimes dig up poo from animals like horses, and we put poo on plants. My mum used to make me do it. It was horrible. I'd have to go down the. We used to live near some fields. I'd have to go with my spade and my bucket, dig up the poo from the horse, bring it back, put it around her roses, and she just laughed at me. It was very horrible. But I had to fertilize her roses using my spade to dig up manure from nearby. Okay. Now here's a picture of the river now. So this is a photograph. We can tell it's a current picture because when 5,000 years ago, when the ancient Egyptians were in charge of Egypt, they wouldn't have had photos. Okay, so we can say this is a more current picture, but we can see the river there where it's reached a high water mark and it's flooding areas. So people as well needed the river to go. to grow. So they grew barley and wheat, as well as things like fruits and vegetables like melons, figs. Figs are quite a tasty fruit. People like peas, which lots of you, I imagine, like. Garlic, I imagine not many of you like. Lettuce, even fewer, but I'm sure some of you do like your cucumber. Okay, so some of the things that they produced as crops in ancient Egypt were some things that we could eat now. So maybe some of you could try and have a plate of ancient Egyptian food at home, some cucumber, lettuces, and vegetables and fruits like melons and peas. Okay, they also grew this stuff called flax, which they needed to grow, make their own clothes. So it wasn't just eating and drinking and washing; they actually needed to grow how they made their clothes. Um, so, like we said earlier, rivers are really important because of fishing. Without fishes, they in this diet at the moment they'd only have vegetables, so they needed that protein for that balanced diet that you've looked at within your science. Also, transport and trade. Okay, so we'll look at the word trade in a minute, but transport means to move things around. Okay, there was no such thing as money in ancient Egypt, so people would trade. They'd swap things. Okay, and to swap things, they needed to get there to swap it. Okay, they need to exchange it. Okay, so if I wanted something from you, I might give you some food, and then you'd give me some pottery in return. We'd exchange, we'd swap, we'd barter. Okay, we'd exchange. Okay, um, for trade, what I'd like you to think about. Earlier we had a look at the word fertilizer where we broke it down, what we thought the definition of it was. And we could break it down into word parts. We could draw a picture of it and then find out a word that means the same, synonym. We do an antonym, a word that means the opposite, and then we used it in a sentence. I'd like you to try and do that with trade. And if you don't know, don't worry too much, because if you've got a dictionary at home, that could help you. Also, if you think about it, I'm talking about transport, which moves stuff around and moving people around. But then I'm thinking as well about trade. And trade is the idea, if you think about the context of this slide, trade is where you're exchanging things for things. Okay, something about buying and selling. That might help you when you're thinking about trade. About words that also have trade in them. Have you ever seen a tradesperson? You've got this as part of your pack to try and fill in today. Okay, so trading then, boats were used to travel up and down the Nile to trade goods, to sell things, to buy things. That might help you. It also allowed people to build, and mud was used because it was wetter than the dry soil where the rest of the desert was positioned. The mud was really important to allow people to build. Okay, the plant as well, the papyrus plant that the river allowed, the fertile soil allowed to grow, was in the paper which people wrote upon. Okay, so the kind of image that people might have created of the archer with his horses wouldn't have been possible to create unless they had the papyrus plant to grow and then to write on. Okay, they didn't have paper. Now, the Egyptian calendar wasn't split into 4 seasons like spring, summer, autumn, winter, and obviously you all know that the best one is spring. It was split into 3 happenings, not seasons, but happenings. The first one was called the flooding season. And they had Eret, which was the when you could plant in that fertilized soil. And finally, they had Shemu, when the crops were harvested. So the stuff that had grown, you could go and get it. Okay. That's going to be the thing that's going to underpin your work today. Because what you're going to do, first of all, you're going to think about that definition of trade in that bottom part of your sheet. You're also going to think about which of the 3 happenings links to which of the descriptions. And you might need to think back to the video bit for that. Then what you're going to try and do is read this passage about the Nile, because that'll help you understand a little bit more about who needed what element of it. Finally, you're going to look at this sheet, and I've shown you on this one how to do it, where you think about each column is one of those 3 areas of the year. Now, Shimu is the area from March to June, and because the flooding was not happening then, so the flooding had happened, the plants had been planted, and now it's the time to harvest. So what I think about here is a picture of who that would help. So that's the fat in the middle row. It's the farmers collecting their harvest. I write in the top box when it was in the year, and in the bottom box, what I write about is why that was useful to somebody. So you're going to try and complete that if you can. You might want to look again at this video if you need to, just to help yourself with that. Right, guys, I'm really excited to see those bits of work, showing me you understand how the Nile was important for the ancient Egyptians. Thank you very much for listening today. I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.